I'm Leigh Brown. This is Crazy Shit in Real Estate. I've got James Milner with us today. For those of y'all that are hungry for some information on Western North Carolina and commercial real estate, and you want him to poke at me for one of my stories, well, this is your conversation. So enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side. We're slowly switching our whole house over to the better stuff, and yeah.
I'm glad you're here. And
thank you for coming on the show.
Make it happen. So,
what's up? I get to have North Carolina on the show. So all of my listeners, viewers in other states are going to be even more jealous because they all wish they were North Carolina people. But why don't you go ahead and tell them who you are, where you're located, that you're commercial, all the little details about your real estate thumbnail.
James Milner. I'm the president owner of Appalachian Commercial Real Estate. We do commercial real estate sales, leasing, consulting, and appraisal services in the western part of the state. We're based in Boone, North Carolina, which is a fun little college town in northwest North Carolina. I was a past president of the North Carolina CCIM chapter, which stands for Certified Commercial Investment Member. So I love all things commercial real estate. I couldn't tell you a lick about selling a house. That's why I got good people like you in my life, Leigh, to handle all things residential. But working in commercial real estate since 2008 and enjoy what I do. So yeah.
All right. So first of all, for those of y'all that are not in real estate, of my viewers and listeners, you should know that CCIM that James mentions is the gold standard in commercial real estate. And I don't even think most residential agents know, James, how absolutely ridiculously hard it is to get that set of letters behind your name. I've taken some of the classes because as a residential agent, I want to learn about the parts of real estate that are not my daily practice. And holy smokes, I still haven't gotten past the one with all the math in it because that's not my talent. And I own that. But there's a lot of math involved in commercial real estate. And if you're looking for commercial agents, that is far and away a different level because in addition to the hard classes, you have to have finished enough transactions to qualify for it, and it's no small bar. So I also want to talk to you about of course, you're in Western North Carolina, which is not a heavy commercial market anyway. You don't have a lot of big metropolitan areas. I hardly count Asheville as metropolitan, although they like to think they are. And Boone is a big, small town where you still know people when you come around. And when Appalachian State University is not in class, it's a much smaller environment. Of course, then you get a lot of the resort and second home people coming in. So talk to us a little bit about what it looks like to do commercial in a primarily rural marketplace.
I mean, it's tough. I think that, part of the problem is just transactional activity, right? Having enough work to do, but that's why I'm very grateful to be a North Carolina certified general appraiser. So when we're not dealing with transactions, we're dealing with appraisals. We are a very entrepreneurial community. Like on another podcast I was on recently, I talked about being all in on our local Chamber of Commerce. So the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce, great people, great organization, and they kind of are in the know of business that is coming to Boone. Usually the key economic driver is the university. That's closely followed up by county government. So there aren't a whole lot of big retail chains coming to the Boone area. Those that do, we try to do our best to help them. But we do work with a lot of mom and pops and a lot of new business owners. We try to be patient. We try to be kind and courteous, all the things a good realtor is. But we help take a very complex problem, which is just the world of commercial real estate, and we try and simplify that and answer their problems or address their problems and help find them space, whether that's leasing or buying. But we do the best we can with the cards that we're dealt. I know that you and I are both passionate about local government and municipalities and being holding them accountable. So our local government, it's sad to say, is very anti-growth, anti-development, right? But we need development for economic growth. So you can't have it both ways.
Well, that's a story that's playing out not just in all 100 North Carolina counties, it's playing out all over the country. And you have this true battle on growth. And it seems like there's the one side that says, nothing, close the doors, pull up the drawbridge. And the other side says, we should allow everything. And they want to do all things when in reality, it's got to be this smart growth idea, which realtors talk about all the time of maybe there's times when you say yes and sometimes when you say no, and you got to strike that balance. And especially when we look at the rebuild in Western North Carolina, I think we're going to see the most visible battles in Watauga County, where you are, and in Buncombe County, where Asheville is, because an area like Yancey County, where the total county population is less than 19,000, that's a different kind of environment where you don't have the very visible battles that we do. So as you look at the rebuild, of course, we lost a bunch of space during Helene, but business is not over. And we have these conflicting messages out there that act like everything's it's back to the two sides. One side says everything's fine, and the other side says it's a hellhole, when in reality, it's all over the place. And an example I can give, my nonprofit Patriot Relief, we're supporting a dance company in Boone. And while they lost their storage where they had all their sets and their costumes, and they've had to do a ton of work to their studio, the owners have been continuing to teach for free when they have to make sure that the dance continues in the community to give the kids something to do. So we're helping with their rebuild, but they did not leave their commercial space. They've just got to figure out how to recover it. So what are you seeing as the post-Helene commercial world? We've lost some space. Have there been rebuilding efforts in the commercial side? And what is the vacancy rate looking like right now? And how's it looking overall? And of course, we're recording this at the beginning of March 2025. So we are just approaching the 6-month mark after Helene. So it's a good time to take a view of where we are and where we're going.
I think that a lot of buildings across Boone had some level of damage. The problem in a place like Boone, which is common across a lot of markets in North Carolina, is there isn't this thing that we call swing space, the ability for a business to temporarily go from one location to another while they deal with the problems at location A. So that puts a lot of pressure on the business. First off, we are in a supply and demand crisis, especially here in Boone. There is high demand and very low supply. It's the same thing that's true in housing, both in our area and across the great state of North Carolina. So these supply and demand issues are putting further pressure on tenants and businesses. We are at a place where we are slowly getting back to normal, but it is not perfect. The chamber is doing a very good job of business snapshot surveys to say, where are you today based on where you were this time last year? And we're using that economic data to go have conversations with our legislators to say, help is still needed. We still need to move forward. There is a reality, Leigh, to the fact that there are businesses that are closing. And that, to me, is the saddest part of what I do, to know that a business owner who has spent their life building, especially restaurant operators who've spent their life building a business, now can't move forward. They've spent all of their savings, all of their resources, and they just have to, for some reason or another, have made a conscious decision to shut their doors. That's the part that kind of gets me in the gut.
Well, it's probably something that a big city commercial broker, let's just use Charlotte, they probably don't experience that emotion when you're reallocating space between Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And then you're talking about a mom and pop business where you've probably taken your family to eat and they just can't continue to string it together. I think we all forget there's an emotional component to commercial real estate as well, but all the big businesses do start as mom and pops, and it's what I love most about a community is when you find the restaurant with all the pickup trucks outside, that's always a good place to eat, and it's very seldom a big chain. It's what makes our community strong. So as you look at the future casting, are you seeing new businesses spring up as people are finding a way to help bring the economy back, or are we not to that phase quite yet?
I don't think we're there quite yet. One of the things that has been interesting to see is that, yes, the demand part is still there, that we're still getting phone calls. Hey, what space do you have available? And especially restaurant operators who love that second generation space. They get to get the bonus of not having to deal with the build out and spending $500,000+ on building out space. So we are getting those prospective calls, but people actually pulling, the ability to take space on is a cost of capital problem, right? That they need that ramp up money. They need money to oftentimes to do the build out. And that's the part of the transaction that is really getting tight right now is finding tenants with capital, both for an operational standpoint and the build out standpoint. So I think it's still going to take some time. We work on a report every quarter for the chamber. It's part of the economic indicators report. And I've said for years now, transactional activity, it's going to keep ticking down and down and down just because cost of capital, the availability of product, basically.
Yeah, I love that phrase that you use, the second generation of a space. That's so sweet. I'm totally thinking about this one restaurant that is going on the market in Concord, and he's leaving all the restaurant equipment. So, of course, some other dreamer is going to come in and start their restaurant up, and it's going to have to be marketed as second generation. That might be
Yeah.
CCIM language, but in residential world, we call things resale. But I think second generation is much prettier. So maybe we'll start a trend over here on the residential side. All right. Now, I'm also noticing you said you got into the business in 2008, which, of course, was when we were already sliding downhill and we were heading right down into the gully. So you've seen a downturn in a market before, although that became the downturn that resulted in available space. This is a moment in the market. I won't call it a downturn because it's not like anybody can plan for a hurricane in the mountains. But when you've got an economy that's really not back yet because we don't have the tourists back yet, and the space is actually diminished, but there's still some demand out there. What would you say you learned during the Great Recession that's applicable now?
You really just have to keep pushing forward. Real estate is a cycle. There are going to be up times and there are going to be down times. And I think that, the big I don't know how it is for you in residential, but right now, the big disconnect in commercial is price, right? Sellers still think that they have the Taj Mahal and buyers want a great deal. You combine that with the cost of capital, the interest rate climate. It's what counselors of real estate calls the disconnect, right, between buyer and seller. There was something that I was going to say in response that the hurricane impacted this community so much because that month, right, that event occurred at the end of September. That next month was their bread and butter season,
Right.
was the season in which all of the tourism comes, all the leaf lookers, everyone comes to Boone, and those mom and pops and big business, think about companies like Mass General Store, for example. They are all making a huge amount of money in the month of October during leaf looking season in order to carry them in the months of January, February, and March when it's cold, no one's coming to Boone, and they can get through to that April, May-esque season. So that is really, in layman's terms, why the storm has been so detrimental to our economy, because they had a whole 6 to 8 week period of time where they were expecting to do very, very well. It was all of the economic reports, whether it's occupancy tax or sales tax, were driven in a direction that we're saying, hey man, we are going to kill it this year. And then obviously the storm comes and what happened next. So anyways.
And for those of y'all that live in coastal markets, just the comparison would be during your high season at the beach. So North Carolina, our high season is June, July, and part of August before it starts to tail off. That would be like a hurricane coming in off season, which this one was, and taking away your year's revenue. Because to James's point, it's not like it's a 12 months business. It's very seasonal. And in addition to the leaves, I mean, Appalachian lost some football weekends, and those are huge in Boone because that's people coming in, the alumni coming in, the parents and the hotels and the restaurants and the spending. And we also had workers that were still here from the end of apple season, and they typically come for apple season, hang out through leaf season, and then work the Christmas tree market. Well, those workers got trapped here because their cars and housing floated away, and then the tree farms, most of them got up and running, but some didn't, and they didn't need as many workers. And so it's all these layers. And I think that's one fact about real estate that's often overlooked, is that there's layers involved in what we do. It's not cut and dried. Here's your square footage. Here's your building. Good luck, sign your lease and move on. We have to help people think through that process of how do you budget for a business that's not going to run all the time. And is it possible? Well, it's been possible for years, but it also does require some flexibility on the part of landlords. And have you seen landlords working with their tenants as much as they can? Because of course, landlords have bills to pay too. And
Exactly. Um, you know, one of the things, we do a lot of landlord reps. So we represent landlords across the greater Boone area. One of the positions that we've taken as their agent is to say, if you are not offering some type of what we call tenant improvement allowance, so an amount of money that the landlord will give to help offset the cost of building out this space. If you're not willing to give some type of tenant improvement allowance, I don't know if I necessarily want to take on this listing, because that is something that is so crucial to the process that if you're not giving one, it's really going to impact the marketability. So tenant improvement allowance has certainly come to table. Every deal is different. Every space is different. Every tenant situation is different. But what we are commonly seeing is that emphasis on tenant improvement allowance still, because of how tight the market is. We're not seeing a lot of abatement, right? So this free rent period. But as to existing tenants and their landlords, I think they've just taken it by a case-by-case basis. I mean, it certainly is not the COVID situation where we're talking months upon months of rent. We had a saying back then that was blend and extend, right? That we will give you some free rent and we're just going to add it to the end of your term. I think landlords have done the very best that they can to work with their tenant relationships and to maintain tenancy, because like you said, the landlord still has bills to pay. And if it is a circle, right, where landlord doesn't get paid, their property tax doesn't get paid, their mortgage might not get paid. And anyways, I did want to ask you a quick question. A number of episodes you've talked about the block of homes. So I want to hear the story about the block, because it is just intrigued me that one day you got a phone call and said, hey, just go buy an entire city block of homes or duplexes or everything in between.
Okay, so listen, James, I can only tell this story because my husband is not at home, because this is the real estate story that is the thorn that I might do like some women do and thrust the knife back in every chance I get, not because I'm ugly, but because that's just how life works. So this would be some several years ago, prior to the recession, and an entire city block of houses in Gaston County had come on the market. And this was all mill houses, so 2 1s, 1 1s, very few 3 bedrooms. So if you're not from North Carolina or from a rural manufacturing town, although Gastonia is not really rural now, but at a time, there was a lot of textile mill work in Gaston County, Gastonia being the county seat. You had a lot of worker houses, and a 2 1 mill house is essentially 900 square feet. And when you come in the front door, you can see the back door, living area on one side of the house, bedrooms on the other side. Not fancy, not expensive, but there were about 40 houses on this block. And it was walking distance to the jail. And so I told my husband, I said, this is the perfect investment because we'll have a tenant population that probably pays cash. And there's probably going to be good turnover because when you're that close proximity to the jail, you tend to have turnover. It's just part of the name of the game. And my husband was like, absolutely not. We're not buying a block of houses near the jail. I don't want tenants that are coming and going from the jail. And I just look at things differently. I said, but this is a fantastic investment. So the list price on it, let me just get my glasses here because it drives my point home. And this is what he has to live with every day, which is why people really do pray for Steve Brown. And so the list price of this block was $375,000, and there were 40 houses on it. So I could have had each house for $9,375. And that's crazy because at the time they were probably pulling $350 in rent a month cash. So $350 times 40. So it was going to be bringing in $14,000 a month in rent, cash rent, in probably brown paper sacks. Don't ask, don't tell. That's what Bill Clinton meant all those years ago is don't ask your tenants where they got the cash and we ain't looking. And he just put his foot down. And so my engineer, quiet, thoughtful, very sweet husband put his little foot down. He's like, we're not doing it. And I, as a good wife, and I said, my husband's a head of households. I listened, and we did not buy that city block of houses. And now let me put my glasses back on because it is 2025 and we'd be approaching the 20-year mark on this investment, which would have been completely paid off by now. So let's just say 40 houses, and let's just say they were all getting market rent, which in that area is probably $900 a month. It would be bringing in $36,000 a month. I'm going to get mad now. And each one of them, if we were to sell these houses, they'd be about $150,000. So we would have had a $6 million city block for $374,000. And long story short, if you see an investment, you should probably buy it. Oh, I mean, I look at real estate all the time, James, and I know you're the same way. We look back at the Great Recession, so that was even prior to the Great Recession. It was just one investor getting rid of his portfolio, and that happens sometimes, whether it's death or they just found something else they want to put their money in. I'd say most of the multifamily that I work in, the seller is just wanting to go buy something else. Investors got an edge. And so that guy had managed to put that block together over years, and he was just done with it. Well, at the time, it feels risky because you're cash tenants. They're not fancy houses. In fact, there would be some roof work and some window work and some heat and air work, and you're walking distance to the jail. And 20 years ago, that didn't feel like anything fancy. It felt like the rough edge of town. Well, even in the rough edge of town, there's people that need to live. And so you kind of have to make that mental switch from landlord to housing provider so you can get past the hump. But when I look back at any of my investments, I'm glad I bought every investment I bought because even the ones that didn't work out have had a purpose in my portfolio. But if I look back at the Great Recession in specific, there's so many houses I wish I'd bought then. Oh my gosh. I had one investor who, during the recession, he would buy any brick ranch in Charlotte that was under $25,000. And for those of y'all that are laughing at home maniacally, we had a lot of houses during the worst of the foreclosure crisis that were old brick ranches under $25,000. Now, this one that we bought, when he and I went to go do the walkthrough, sometimes you couldn't walk through until after closing because then we had to evict the squatters or evict the people they'd gotten foreclosed on. It's just a whole world of interesting things. But we opened up the stove and all the maggots came pouring out. And I can never unsee that. But he was still glad he bought it because that same house that he bought for $25,000 in 2010 is worth $200,000 now because he was willing to take the risk and he was willing to inherit the maggots and go clean the house out. And if there's one thing I tell young people when I tell them these stories, it's buy all the real estate you can, because if you're buying it to hold it, yes, the market's going to do this. And, we talked about real estate being cyclical, but you go 20 years out, I don't think anything really has gone backwards over a 20-year horizon unless you just bought something that was wildly not cared for or wildly inappropriate or something terrible happened. But in the broad brush of things, you buy as much real estate as you can. So yes, after that debacle of not being able to buy the city block that I'm never, ever going to stop being upset about, because I wouldn't have to be doing this podcast if I'd have bought that city block. I'd have enough cash flow not to do this. So people need to buy my coaching, since my husband wouldn't let me buy that city block of houses. But after that, and after I proved him wrong, he doesn't do anything now except just sign the DocuSigns when they come. He just signs it and says, all right, whatever we're buying, we're buying. And, North Carolina's tenants buy the entirety, so he has half anyway. And I said, you could have had a half of a lot more, buddy, but you didn't listen. And so that's the city block. And now I'm mad again, James. Thanks. So if you're in real estate and you're listening to this podcast or watching it and thinking, man, I need some more Leigh Brown answers in my life. Well, guess what, friends? I have a new program that is launching right now called Answers.Real Estate, where I will give you every bit of insight I have to help you grow your real estate business, help you better respond to consumers, to provide a more excellent real estate experience, so that the next time you land on crazy shit in real estate, you'll have a better solution to whatever you ran into. Answers.Real Estate. There are monthly plans available. You will love it. Get your coaching. Sign up with me today.
Wow. I see. I thought the story was that you actually did buy the city block. And now the story is that you...
Now I'm just mad that I don't have it, because I wouldn't have sold it. I'd have it.
One
the
thing,
cash flow I would have on that.
Yeah. One thing that I did want to talk to you about that I think is important is this differential between commercial and residential, and staying in our, I like to call it staying in our lanes, but, I am very clearly committed to my lane. I know that you are very committed to your lane. And there could be some crossover. I said to someone the other day, I will take the risk on my own personal home because I understand that risk. But other than that, if like my best friend calls me and says, hey man, I want to sell or buy a home, I can't help you. I know nothing about that world, either from a brokerage standpoint or an appraisal standpoint. Like I don't mess, I haven't written a URR in, I don't know, 12, 13 plus years. It's kind of scary.
And I wish people talked about that more, because the commercial side is very driven by spreadsheets. It's driven by numbers.
Yes.
And there is some emotion tossed in depending on the kind of commercial. But on the residential side, it's emotion first. And then the numbers kind of get blended in after the emotion feels good. So they're just different spaces. And I actually don't represent myself on residential because my emotion takes over too. I'm like, how dare you try to negotiate that repair? and I become everybody else's nightmare client. So I have other agents represent me. In fact, I did a 1031, and it was in North Carolina. I completed it with another agent because I was going to get in my own way. And she's over here keeping me in my right space. But I will say this, like when I want to do something that's different than straight residential, I learned multifamily by having another multifamily agent coach me and mentor me through the process. So to your point, it's wildly important to do what you're skilled at and know your strengths. And then all you realtor friends who listen and are watching, hey, what's up? If you want to branch out, get a mentor. And I love the agents who tell me they're resi-mercial because they have to be. So let's just take, for example, Avery County, North Carolina. Avery is a small county in North Carolina. It's fairly rural by nature. There is some commercial, there's more residential, there's agricultural, all these different pieces of real estate. So there are agents who have had to learn different angles, but that's different than the agent who knows one and branches off. And so just for the love of all that's holy, friends, if you're in real estate, get a mentor who will pour into you their knowledge. And if you're a consumer, don't be somebody's testing ground unless they're bringing their broker or their mentor along for the ride, because let's just be honest, when agents try to branch out to save a commission, it's the consumer that gets hurt.
Mm.
So don't be the person who hurts the consumer. I love that you brought that up, because in Western North Carolina, that is often the excuse of agents who say they need to be all things to all people to save a deal. Well, if you're going to be all things to all people, get a mentor who's also all things.
We have built a business on, so the mission statement of my company is, we want to give people the information and resources that they need in order to make an informed decision regarding the complexity of commercial real estate. You know, I wish my residential peers would pick up the phone, email me, and say, hey, man, we need your help. We need your expertise for this deal. I will gladly write a referral any day of the week, twice on Sunday, but they won't do it. You know, or go get educated, you know, go through CCIM or go through another program to learn the aspects of commercial real estate. But mentorship is so important, education is so important, and just understanding that you shouldn't just do something for the sake of doing it.
Or, by the way, be the really smart agent. And when you call James and say, hey, I want to give you a referral because this person wants to buy that second generation restaurant, use that as your learning experience. Say, I'll work for the referral fee, but let me shadow you. Go shadow the process and learn from the pro. I have found that that's a beautiful way to learn the business, because the other person gets to be the lead. You already have a relationship with the client, and then they get to watch you learn. There's a power in that kind of humility. And I love that you encourage that. And I do wish more agents would listen in on that. So, as you're thinking about your career in commercial real estate, James, if we were to ask you, what's the craziest thing you've seen up in Western North Carolina, Watauga County, Boone, doing commercial real estate? What have you seen that still makes you say, I still can't believe that?
I just think that one of the things that hurts me the most is just the fact that we can't get the development that we need. My biggest pain point right now in my community is housing. We are in a housing crisis, and we all acknowledge that, even the not so fun local government in Boone. But what I would say is that you have to understand basic economics of supply and demand. Everyone complains that rent in Boone especially is just astronomical. It is crazy what these student housing complexes are charging for rent. And everyone's like, well, how do we get rent cheaper? Landlords shouldn't be charging this much money. My answer, build, build, flood the market with supply. And when you create competition, then rent will come down. And it's the same thing for single family homes. You want the price of your home to get cheaper, there needs to be more supply. Instead of, you know, planting the NIMBY flag a time that the tract home developer comes to town, why don't you say, understand that this supply of housing will be beneficial to a community. So the craziest thing that I'm seeing right now is that people just don't understand simple real estate economics. Just drives me absolutely insane. But you know, it's the world that we live in, unfortunately.
But it's frustrating too. It's not just our local elected officials, it's the public, but it's also a lot of the realtors out there who don't become students of this profession, and they're not making themselves masters of their craft to understand supply and demand, which is basic economics, but it's not taught effectively in the public school system. We know the colleges don't necessarily teach very basic cut and dried economics. So there's a disconnect. And my favorite is that when you talk about building those less expensive housing options, NIMBY, of course, means not in my backyard for those of y'all that don't pay attention to your planning and zoning. But the same people who declare everything's too expensive, don't want anything to happen that would drag their value down because they want their value up unless they're paying taxes and they want it down. But then for their tax value below, they still want the value to be up when they sell it. So it's a cognitive dissonance. And then what really gets me on fire is when you talk about where those people are going to live. And so we're seeing a challenge in that supply space post Helene. I'm watching it in one community in specific, which shall remain nameless because we're currently having a fight with the town, where they do not want to allow the rebuild of someone's home because they no longer want homes like that, which means they want nicer homes in the community. So you're going to get rid of, you see this as a chance to get rid of the affordable housing so that you can do fancier things, which means there's going to be less housing available. So where are your kids and grandkids? Where are your workers going to live? Where are the first responders going to live? It's just a disconnect. And I hope we get back to a common sense place where we can say, all right, let's say yes to some things and figure out what the answer is. Because the only other solution, if you don't want to build, is to run off all these people that are renting your places or buying your houses. So, okay, great. Tell everybody to go somewhere else, then your prices come down. Great idea.
I think that one thing that most people don't understand is that a healthy economy in any community has such a vital importance on housing, right? Take Boone, for example. I would love for us to attract biomedical or big tech or you name the industry, would love for that to supplement what is happening in Boone. You bring a CEO up to Boone, North Carolina, and they're just looking around nature going, oh, this is so pretty. This is so grand. The first question out of their mouth is going to be, where are my people going to live? And when the local politicians say, we don't have anything because we have no supply, bye, company, bye. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And, that's just what gets me so fired up is that we need housing as a component of a healthy economy. And to bring business in. And a lot of what we do in commercial, we are looking at those households, right? One thing that most folks don't understand is the importance of demographics to commercial real estate. And part of that demographic data is households. So anyways.
Well, one of the smartest companies about that was always Harris Teeter, and that's for those of y'all that aren't from around here, that's our big regional grocery chain that grew up out of Matthews with the Harris family and the Teeter family, and they've been purchased by Kroger ever since. That's when they started going downhill. But anyway, before they got bought by Kroger, Harris Teeter was the most diligent company ever when it came to demographics with their commercial buildings because they were looking for communities that had a radius with a certain amount of households with families that had young children, because they know that when you have young children, you spend more per person in a grocery store than in any other phase in life. The young singles don't spend at the grocery store and the elders don't. But man, you got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, you're their target. So that's where they planted their stores. And as a result, the companies that couldn't afford to do the demographic research would just watch where Harris Teeter planted a flag and then land around them. So it became this really interesting understanding of what area they were moving into. And of course, other companies do the research. We just pay attention to Harris Teeter in specific. But you do mention biomedical. And in the mountains in specific, there's a lot of people that are into the bio side of the medical. So when you think about what we're looking at in our North Carolina legislature, there's constant conversation about the legalization of marijuana, which I firmly believe is going to have a pretty fast grassroots response in Western North Carolina. That's biomedical too. So do you think that let's just take Watauga County as an example. Do you think that there will be a different perspective on business when the business is growing marijuana than it is now? Because I know they're not super business friendly as it stands.
No, I think that, anyone who is willing to invest in, it doesn't matter what you do. And I know that sounds very blanket-esque and very vague, but, I think that what we're concerned about is relationships and businesses that want to come into Watauga County and build and settle and grow, right? That is, to me, what Watauga County is all about right now, is who wants to come and be part of the party. Doesn't matter what you want to do, but let's take something small and try and grow it into something big. I will say that anyone's relationship with a legislator is very important. And I have come to realize that. My local legislator is Representative Ray Pickett. He is working on something right now, which are changes to so in North Carolina, we use this thing called the North Carolina Discharge Schedule, which basically says how much these municipalities can charge the impact fee for water and sewer. And every municipality does it a little bit differently. But one of the things that has come up in Boone recently are these, what we call system development fees, and the pain that it puts a local business in, because they have to go write another, one guy said that he had to pay a $30,000 bill just to the town just to have the right to use water and sewer. It is nonsensical. And part of the problem is not necessarily the town, but it is what we call the North Carolina Discharge Schedule, which is an outdated document. And they went and worked on the residential side of it, but did not go and work on the commercial side of it. So now there is hopefully a commitment to work on the commercial side. Let's get it up to the 21st century of what businesses are actually using on a daily basis, and hopefully help small business. But that, to me, is a beautiful story of how we as realtors are supposed to be involved, in that we are bringing our real estate problems to our local officials, whether that's local or state level or federal level, and saying, we need help. Help us do our job as realtors.
Well, it's also, I'm just sitting here processing, it's why commercial realtors need to be at the table with residential realtors, because that discharge information was getting updated because of pressure from Cabarrus County, because our per fixture amount, when you look at the water and sewer allocations, is controlled by DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, and they were using data from the 70s. And in the 70s, as some of y'all that are medium age like me will remember, we had better toilets back then. You could flush everything in one flush, and then they force us onto these low flow fixtures, and now it's a 2-flush household, so you use more water, but that's a different conversation. And so we have different faucets, we have different fixtures, but they're using 70s data. We had the data at the Water and Sewer Authority in Cabarrus County. So at Walsack, we'd been tracking the data. We gave it to DEQ, and they met us in the middle because they didn't even want to use our data because they had to be in charge. Long story short, it never occurred to me that when they updated the residential fixture information, they didn't update commercial. Oh my gosh. But our legislator was focused on getting Walsack to get updated so we could complete the permitted housing starts in Cabarrus County.
Yeah.
But again, inside the state, we have 100 counties, and they all have different challenges. We have to keep the conversations going across county lines and across specialty lines so we can do great things for our community. So I hope you get that battle straightened out, and let's go Representative Pickett. Maybe we'll get him to come on the show and talk about water and sewer a little bit. Representative Brian Biggs came on to tell us about what's going on with the squatters legislation. Hopefully that'll get through this session, because I'm trying to help somebody with a squatter right now, and it never ends. Oh. So, James, if somebody wants to reach out to you to find out about Boone, Watauga County, Western North Carolina, CCIM, Status Commercial World, or any of the above, what's the best way for them to find you?
Our website is pretty simple. It's www.appalachian.com. So Appalachian is Appalachiancre.com, and you can find all our information there.
And the proof that you're middle-aged is you still use the www. The young people don't even know what that means anymore. We came along when the World Wide Web was brand new and exciting. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for what you've done for the commercial real estate profession and what you continue to do. So it's an honor to have you on the show, and thank you for what you do and will do.
Thank you, Leigh.
All right, guys, say something nice about James in the comments, or say something nice about Western North Carolina, or just say something and then make sure you hit the bell to subscribe. We'll see you next time.
By the way, friends, don't miss my brand new coaching program at answers.realestate, where you can have access to Leigh Brown, submit your questions, have them answered, meet like-minded professionals, have an entire library to help you build your business no matter what happens in the market. Get signed up today. I promise you'll be glad you did. So if you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, and catch another amazing episode by clicking above. Crazy Shit in Real Estate is also available in all of your normal podcast apps. So if that's where you like to hang out, go find me, click subscribe, and most importantly, leave me a review that says you think I'm awesome, my guests are awesome, or this content is just exactly what you were looking for. And then, by the way, if there's something you need, you want to learn about something, you can comment below anytime. You can also send me a direct message if you need to remain anonymous. No judgment. But anyway, I'll only judge if you forget to subscribe and click. I'll see you next time.